Yo, happy new year, Guardians. It is your boy Sincere coming at you with a fresh video to kickstart 2022. Today we're going to be talking about the Behemoth, the single worst subclass in Destiny 2. This one's juicy and I'll do my best to take you along this journey with me. Eyes up, Guardian, let's get into it. Recently, I've seen a lot of chatter about how Bungie have essentially ruined Titans since the bottom tree striker nerfs. To be more specific, the general sentiment for people who share this perspective isn't that Titans are suddenly unplayable, but they can no longer compete with Warlocks or Hunters, especially in the competitive playlist. Now, if you watch any of my videos, you'll know I already sing high praises for the Thundercrash Titan, but today's video isn't about that at all, since I already know what I consider to be the best Titan subclass. But it made me curious, what then is the worst Titan subclass? The first thought that I had that instantly popped into my head was the Behemoth Titan. But was my prejudice warranted or not? I had to investigate. Let's start at ground zero. Let's think about this simple question. What does the Behemoth want to do? To answer this question, let's take a peep at the Behemoth's toolkit. We won't go into too much depth with the stasis fragments. We'll look at the ones that improve the quality of life the most in PvP, but for now, let's start with grenades. For grenades, the Behemoth has access to the three traditional stasis grenades: Glacial, Duskfield, and Cold Snap. Each of these grenades have seen major nerfs in the Crucible sandbox since stasis first hit the scene. Some have been directly tuned, while others have seen nerfs because of the global stasis nerfs. For example, Duskfields used to have an intense suck range, and Cold Snaps used to be the sheer terror of the Crucible. These two grenades were tuned individually, while the Glacial was tuned by Bungie's global stasis nerfs. So, what is the grenade of choice in 2022? The answer to that question is that it depends. It varies by game mode, that is 6v6 playlists or 3v3s, but I will start by saying Duskfields are essentially useless in PvP and offer little to no utility, so let's leave that there. Glacial nades no longer freeze on impact because of the nerfs intended for Shatter Dive, and the global shatter damage nerfs have also limited their effectiveness. But Glacial grenades are still very effective in 3v3 playlists, if the map allows for it. Maps like Wormhaven, Anomaly, Burnout come to mind, while on the more open-ended maps, you may not see the same level of utility. This is because the true use of Glacial nades is to completely lock off angles and line of sight, allowing for better focus fire while restricting the opponent's movements. That leaves us with one: Cold Snap grenades. These grenades should be the grenade of choice when it comes to 6v6 playlists because of their freeze potential and killing potential, though in my experience, these are very inconsistent with their tracking. They're also very easy to counter. Opponents frequently backpedal them, and while this creates the opportunity to collapse as they backpedal or run away from you, you can't help but think that other subclass grenades do a much better job at this. Now let's move on to the Behemoth's melee ability. I can't believe I have to say this, but we won't be considering Diamond Lance at all. Given the global nerfs to stasis, to meet any activation conditions for this in the Crucible in any reliable sense is a unicorn level mythological creature for me. So let's talk Shiver Strike. This used to be absolutely immense, but boy, how the mighty have fallen. This thing used to be the stuff of nightmares with crazy utility. You could use this to escape, entry frag, or clean up kills. Alongside the general previous stasis meta, this thing could give you serious fits with its immense knockback and slow debuffs. Wallbanging with this melee is a thing of the past, but something that powerful had to be nerfed. To cut a long story short, this thing no longer travels anywhere near as quickly or as far as it used to. To be quite frank, this thing absolutely sucks now. It essentially is supposed to do all of the things it used to be able to do, except with one major problem now. It can't. So what about Howl of the Storm? Okay, some of you might not know this, but that is the actual name of the slide melee ability for the Behemoth. Yeah, the one that was so good, it usurped the melee utility from Shiver Strike. But Bungie went to work on this as expected. You can no longer freeze using this the way that you once could. Bungie made it much harder to freeze by reducing its effective hitbox. In summary, this thing is now extremely inconsistent and you have to execute this perfectly to get any utility from this, at least offensively. Finally, for fragments. The two fragments that offer the most utility in the Crucible, in my opinion, are 1. The Whisper of Hedrons. This fragment gives a stat bonus to stability, handling, aim assist, mobility, resilience, and recovery after freezing a target with stasis. Do not sleep on this fragment. 2. The Whisper of Chains. While you're near frozen targets or a friendly stasis crystal, you take less damage. Also, you get a +10 recovery bonus. To put this into perspective, hand cannon headshot damage will go from 70 to 53. That's almost a 25 damage mitigation buff. At this point, you're starting to see a recurring theme with this subclass. Since the Bungie devs always intended for stasis to freeze or significantly slow stasis targets, we are now in this awkward ground where Behemoth can no longer do anything it was initially intended to do, at least not as easily, which is to freeze enemies, rendering its neutral game very restricted. But let's keep going. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, Glacial Quake. The thing that's absolutely nuts is I actually now can see the wisdom behind the vanilla Behemoth. Let's run down a quick list of things Glacial Quake no longer has access to. AoE flash freeze on cast, immense shields and damage mitigation, immense mobility through pre-nerf Shiver Strike and Cryoclasm. This super is a joke now. It literally has no threat. It can't fight or challenge other supers. Before, the Glacial Quake audio cue used to be the stuff of nightmares, making the entire lobby clench their butt cheeks tighter than an Attack on Titan cliffhanger. Now, I can literally hear people licking their lips to destroy this super. Damage mitigation has been nerfed into oblivion. Heaven forbid you get caught without a barricade and good luck trying to Shiver Strike away into cover. It literally takes 10 million frames to start up Shiver Strike and it travels a pitiful distance now. And you know what the real cherry on the cake is? It's almost as if Bungie has a sense of humor. Ironically, this super is a tier 1 super, meaning it has one of the longest passive regens in game right now. So not only is it awful, it also takes the longest to charge. For a quick comparison, other tier 1 supers are Spectral Blades, Fist of Havoc, Hammer of Soul, and Winter's Wrath, the Gandalf super. I really don't want to flog a dead horse, but from an objective perspective, Behemoth has a huge identity problem. I'm not calling for it to regain its Darth Vader terror status in the Crucible, but Bungie, do something. This subclass is supposed to fulfill the power fantasy of a cold juggernaut that destroys everything in its path. But now, it's the most impotent version of itself. It's gone from being a Blastoise to a Squirtle. I won't be giving rhyme Behemoth playstyles any time of day here. We don't condone or promote ratty behavior on this channel. We fight like gentlemen and gentlewomen. So what did I do about it? Here's the thing. This was a rough experience. At first, it took me a while to get my head around this subclass and how to play around its more restricted toolkit. To really review this though, I had to test Behemoth in both 6v6 playlists, that's Control, and 3v3 playlists, that's Trials of Osiris. Let's get the bad news out of the way first. I experimented with a bunch of builds, but the build I saw the most success with was an armamentarian build with 100 discipline, and for weapons, I switched between a demolitionist Eyes Luna to maximize grenade uptime or a headstone Eyes Luna to farm resist buffs. There's no easy way to say this, but this subclass sucks in Control or 6v6 playlists from my experience of tinkering over the last few days. I was still able to top frag, but I couldn't help but feel as though I was on the back foot in every encounter. The reason? You feel all the nerfs to stasis in 6v6. Opponents have more survivability because their teammates can easily bail them out of sticky situations. It's almost like you can't capitalize on slowing or freezing because it just doesn't last as long anymore. Glacial grenades are not as effective for the same reason. The enemy team can just shoot them out. Sure, you can use them to block line of sight, but shouldn't a grenade offer a little more than that? Think about what axiom bolts do, or lightning grenades, or solar grenades. They have zoning effectiveness while maintaining a serious threat. Almost every subclass is equipped with something that has the potential to carry you, or a crutch if you will. To illustrate, I'll fire off a couple subclass perks that offer significant value that can bail you out over the course of a match. True Sight, Knock him down, that's the bottom tree Goldie perk, Knockout, Inertia Override, Combat Meditation, Devour, Heat Rises, the list is endless. But the Behemoth makes you feel naked, in the I'm exposed sense of the word, and you're punished for this in Control. For 6v6 playlists, I would rank the Behemoth as the absolute flat out worst subclass in Destiny 2. For a letter grade, I would give it an F, as in not fun to play at all. So what about Trials? Trials is a different kettle of fish. In Trials, with the pace of play and the focus on teamwork, and most importantly, staying alive, the Behemoth has more of a chance to shine. I was extremely surprised by how effective this subclass was in Trials, but to be honest, I think the map selection had more to do with its success than anything. During the time of recording this video, the Trials map this weekend is Wormhaven, full of corridors, small spaces, which perfectly complements the general stasis playstyle. The super still absolutely sucks, but you are able to play either aggressively with Glacial Nade or a little bit more supportively by walling off angles to play a down mate's res, coupled with a Titan Barricade. This massively improves your survivability. If I were to give the Behemoth a letter grade in Trials, at least on a map that complements the stasis playstyle, I'd give it a solid B-. Now for some tips and tricks. If you are hellbent on playing this subclass, I do have some tips and tricks for you. Number 1, something you should practice is setting up crystals before entering gunfights. Rather than trying to use the Howl of the Storm to freeze someone, use it to buff yourself. The resist buff gives you a 25% damage mitigation bonus, allowing you to survive 3 taps and double melees. Headstone is also useful in setting this up as well. Tip number 2, run a high discipline build with Demolitionist if possible. The Eyes Luna is one of the better primary weapons that can run this, alongside some other useful perks. You essentially have to ability spam with stasis, and given Bungie's recent endeavors to reduce this, you need to maximize this uptime. Tip number 3, this one's a little bit of a strange tip, but don't think about relying on your super at all. When you do have it, use it more defensively than offensively. Don't spam Shiver strikes for mobility, instead try to slide and create crystals where possible and use this as a zoning tool. Tip number 4, don't sleep on the Whisper of Hedron's fragment. The resilience buff allowed me to tank a golden gun shot from a bottom tree golden gun in my super without the resist buff active. Tip number 5, you will always want to preemptively ability spam for zoning purposes. It will be rare that you freeze on impact and can instantly capitalize. And tip number 6, for the love of cheesecake, do not use dusk fields. They are useless. In the end, I can't in good faith recommend anybody play this subclass. It's utterly shit. It needs way too much help just to help it function. In my opinion, it's not reliable or consistent, leaving little to no peace of mind when moving from encounter to encounter. If the Behemoth, initially designed as the cold juggernaut that made its opponents quake in their boots, nowadays it does nothing but make people jiggle. If stasis is your power fantasy, I'd recommend playing the Stasis Warlock, or the Gandalf Super as I like to call it. Stay away from the Behemoth. It will stress you the hell out. I hope Bungie can find a way to solve the Behemoth identity crisis, but for now, do yourself a favor and play the Thunder Crash Titan. At least that's a blast and it's fun as hell. That's all for today. Your boy Sincere, signing out.